Justice for all. Very light pace of COVID. No symptoms except for vertigo and low back pain. Who knows? They just kind of came and went at the same time. I tested positive, those pills, Paxil pills that you get now, and they don't taste bad, but they leave this tinny taste in your mouth. It's 24/7, and they kind of wanes away a day or two after you start taking pills. But positive, and that's a negative. So I'm very happy to do that. It's my first day in June in the office. So, good. What else is happening? There's a happy dollar or sad dollar, right?
It's a happy dollar. I pharmacy student, Tia Smith, who's doing a rotation in our pharmacy. She's in her 4th of 5 weeks. So we looking for her next week, unfortunately, but she's the one for her next rotation. She's from the little water, the best thing about it.
My name is Tia Smith. I am a pharmacy student in pharmacy. This is my last year of school on rotation. My first rotation was down graduating in May 2023. I am from the University of Iowa. University of Missouri for my interest.
I realize how beautiful the zoo campus was. My daughter told me, really? What?
So if you start straight from high school, you get a 7-year program. If you go into the freshman straight from the freshman program, it's just 4 years.
So you're almost 7 years old.
I'm close to the 7-year side because I originally planned on doing occupational therapy and then I switched to pharmacy, but I'm not all
Just happy. I'm happy. My son's coming in tonight. My daughter and her fiance are coming in tomorrow. We're having a wedding shower for my daughter.
I've got a few people to thank for helping me organize this program. I did not do all by myself. First, Al, for making initial contact with our speaker, and then Jerry actually contacted our speaker and set it up, and then I just followed up to confirm that it's from you. So anyway, I'd like to introduce Eric Bronner. He is from the Veterans Organization, and he's going to talk about his organization, his background, his organization, and his will allow plenty of time for questions. So we're going to try to follow the right questions along with.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Everyone, thank you very much for having me. As Ian said, my name is Eric Bronner. I live in Western Rose, the founder of Veterans for Political Innovation.
It's a mouthful. We'll tell you a little bit of the backstory, but we're a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We're mobilizing veterans and supporters from across the country and across the political spectrum for three very specific election innovations that we'll talk about today. And why is this important here in Missouri? Because this package of election innovations we'll talk about is coming to Missouri via a ballot amendment that we all will get to vote on this November. The ballot amendment right now is called Better Elections Missouri. It will most likely be Amendment 1. We don't know yet. The signatures have been submitted to the Secretary of State. It should be certified in July, and we'll get to vote on it in November. So that's what we're going to talk about. The goal is to make politics less toxic through healthy competition. That's what we're all about. So why did my co-founders and I, were all veterans, why did we start Veterans for Political Innovation? I've been involved with the cross-partisan reform movement here in Missouri for over 3 years. And there was a veteran who saw my passion for these reforms, and he said, Eric, you should do something to get more veterans involved. That was the idea. So I started doing the research, and lo and behold, there's over 40,000 veteran service organizations in our country. There's hundreds of cross-partisan or non-partisan reform organizations, but there really was no one trying to bring those two worlds together. So that's why we started Veterans for Political Innovation. The goal is to get veterans to use their voice. In spite of all of our flaws, we are still one of America's most trusted institutions. So how do we mobilize us to use our voices to help fix some of our least trusted institutions? So that's what we're all about. So here's my backstory. So I grew up, I'm the son of a couple of teachers from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on a suburb of Milwaukee. And in high school, I was fortunate to receive an appointment to the Naval Academy from Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner. And after my time at the Naval Academy, I went down to Pensacola, Florida to start flight school. And I ended up flying in the back of this beautiful plane here. Raise your hand if you've seen the new Top Gun. Anyone? All right, see ya. Thank you. Sir, thank you. I was the only person in the theater that was hooting and hollering when I saw my plane. Get a little bit of a cameo. We don't usually get much love. You know, the fighter jets are much more, well, they're sexier, let's just be honest. And I was not like Maverick or Goose, although I've been to the same place where the Top Gun training takes place. So going on off of this, I'm for the George Washington from 1999 to 2002. That means on the morning of September 12th, I was flying patrols in this plane around New York City. And on the back, the purpose of our plane is we're like a mobile air traffic control station. We protect all of the assets, whether it's ships or planes in any given region in the world. And that day, my radar screen, which is normally filled with thousands, maybe 10,000 contacts, there was only a couple tiny blips flying, and that would be Air Force One flying up and the fighter jets and other assets that were protecting it. And that's an image that for me as a person I'll never forget. And what I often ask everyone to just pause and reflect, everyone remembers where they were on September 11th. Do you also remember what it felt like to be an American in the weeks following September 11th? Do you remember the sense of unity we felt, the sense of pride we had in our country? Sir?
I was married with it. My wife and I took our honeymoon in Europe 6 days after 9/11. And it was unbelievable. We were in Berlin, and you're American, and there was a private party in our storefront. They said, oh, it's a private party. Oh, wait a minute, you're American, you can come in. So
Yeah.
there was a real sense of, and we ran into a retired fireman, and that, yeah, a real sense of
Goodwill.
American goodwill.
Yeah, there was. My mom actually grew up in Berlin, so it's a city I'm very fond of. But yeah, we've fallen so far from that, and there's many reasons for it. But our politics has become far too toxic and divisive. And so when I got out of the Navy in 2005. My wife is from Sikeston, Missouri. Has anyone been to Lambert's, home of the Throat Hole? The Lambert family thanks you. And I grew up in Wisconsin, so St. Louis was a compromised city. We moved here in 2005. I went to law school and practiced law for about a minute. And then had started a real estate business with my wife, and we did that for about 7 minutes. And then, if I'm being honest, it was a little bit of a midlife crisis. I had, on the surface, had everything someone could dream of, but I was really missing that sense of mission and purpose I had experienced in the Navy. And I was that strange kid who grew up in Milwaukee watching political conventions, both of them, from beginning to end. I've always wanted to engage in the political arena, but I'm not a partisan. I'm not a red team or a blue team person. And so if you're not a partisan, your options are very limited. As it turns out, close to 50% of veterans are just like me. They have never affiliated with either party, or they just haven't been partisan actors. Why is that? Because the oath we swear as veterans is not to a party or political leader, it's to the Constitution, right? And so that's one of the reasons we started Veterans for Political Innovation, was to give voice to the independent and unaffiliated folks out there. There's many, many of them. And in fact, one statistic I'd like to reference, in the state of Colorado, there are more registered unaffiliated voters than Democrats and Republicans combined. This is the trend, but our political system is still a classic duopoly, which we'll talk about in a minute. So that's my family there. And so how did this transition from law and real estate to political reform work happen? It was a podcast on Freakonomics Radio in November of 2018. Has anyone ever heard of Freakonomics? Yeah, it was started by a man out of Kansas City. And on that podcast, it was called America's Hidden Duopoly. And it was the research that went into a groundbreaking book that we'll talk more about, called The Politics Industry. And it was one of those moments, I'm in my car, I'm grabbing for napkins, taking notes, because I was hoping to engage in politics. I didn't know how or where. And as it turns out, there was two people who had done a ton of research into why are we so divided? Why is there partisan gridlock? Why is less and less getting accomplished? And they actually proposed solutions. And those solutions were so compelling that I said, whatever it takes, that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to work on for the rest of my life. So that's what we're doing. The book, The Politics Industry. I mean, just one statistic, 2020, on federal elections alone, $15 billion was spent. Remember that runoff in Georgia? $45 million was raised and spent by the four candidates in that runoff. And this is all to maintain a system that serves the politics industry. It's a classic, you know, just like the military industrial complex, there's a political industrial complex, right? And it's an American, this is one of the quotes from the books. American politics is an industrial strength, nation crippling perversion of competition. In any other industry, it would be illegal. It's a duopoly. Two major parties write all the rules to maintain power and control at all costs. So if those are the problems, then what are the solutions? Well, there's lots of calls for more stability. How is that going? Edward Deming, the father of quality control, said a bad system will beat a good person every time. There's lots of people saying, just vote for me, I'll fix everything. But a good person inside of a bad system will just continue to get the same results. So reforms and calls for stability are not enough. What we need are innovation. What is an innovation? It's powerful and it's achievable. And what we're going to talk about today are the three innovations that my organization is focused on in states across the country. And was that me?
No,
Okay.
you're good now.
So in states across the country, part of what gives me a lot of hope, there was an attorney in Alaska who heard the same research that went into this book. He was so compelled by it, he started a ballot amendment in Alaska for the same system we're working to bring to Missouri. It passed in 2020. All of us here in Missouri are going to get to see how that works this summer for the very first time in Alaska. There's legislation pending in my home state of Wisconsin for this system. There's a ballot amendment coming to Missouri and to Nevada. This is what I love and hate about my job. Depending on what state I'm working on, I'm either getting punched by someone from the red team or punched by someone from the blue team. Insiders from both parties do not like this system. Why is it? Because they figured out how to manipulate the current system for their own selfish gains. So you're going to hear a ton of misinformation about how terrible this is, how this is just outside money trying to make our red state blue. If someone says that, then ask them, well, why are they doing the same thing in blue states then? Because in blue states, it's the blue team saying the same thing, that they're just trying to make our blue state red. So it's just not true. These are the innovations that go into what is called Better Elections Missouri. Something called an open primary, and we are fighting for open primaries across the country. Right now in Missouri, what we have is a semi-open primary. When you go to vote in August, hopefully most of you do, what's the first question they ask you? You want the Republican or the Democratic ballot? Guess who that ballot belongs to? We the people. It doesn't belong to the parties. That's the first way they divide and conquer. That's what we're trying to change. It's called an open primary. Everyone will be on one ballot regardless of party. Our libertarian friends, independents, they'll all be on one ballot. You'll get one vote in August, just like you do now. And the top 4 will go to the general election, where we use our next favorite innovation. Ranked choice instant runoff voting. Why is this a great innovation? Well, first of all, it's new to us, but it's not new to the world. Our friends in Ireland have used ranked choice voting for over 100 years. They call it the single transferable vote. They've been counting rounds by hand in Ireland for over 100 years, and it's worked great. It helps counteract this race to the extremes that we see. It incentivizes problem solving. In a ranked choice system, negative attack ads are ineffective. How nice would it be to have a fall where you don't hear just a never-ending onslaught, right? My kids can quote those ads and, Dad, are they really like that? You know, that's what we're teaching the next generation, is the way you win is through fear, hate, and negative attack ads. So that goes away, or it becomes much less effective. Will there still be people that try to use it? Maybe. And then, you know, why are these reforms? Why is this a veterans or a military issue? Sometimes people ask me that. Ranked choice voting is used for military and overseas ballots in 6 southern states. Why did they do that? Why did Georgia just pass a law using ranked choice voting for overseas ballots? It saves their taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars, not having to ship off another set of ballots for a runoff election. New York City used it for the first time. Sometimes people say, well, it was a real mess. The election administration in New York City is a mess. That goes back much farther than the use of ranked choice voting. What it did, though, was it helped new voices get elected, and it saved New York City taxpayers $10 million in not having to have a runoff election. Over 40 cities in Utah use ranked choice voting. The Republican Party in Virginia used ranked choice voting to nominate Glenn Youngkin, who went on to win as governor. So it is not a tool for the red team or the blue team. This is one of the lies you're going to hear, that ranked choice voting is a tool of progressives to take over red states. Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true, and there's not an ounce of evidence to support it. So, Better Elections Missouri, what is it and why are we so excited about it? This is a very rudimentary example of what our ballots in Missouri might look like. So, Better Elections will do 3 things, and we're going to start with this top 4 instant runoff voting, okay? And again, this is a ballot amendment we're all going to get to vote on in November. So your combined primary ballot, everyone, regardless of party, is on one ballot, right? You get one vote. The top 4 go to the general election. And then The voter has a choice. You can vote for one if you want, but if you want to participate in all 4 rounds, if there's 4 rounds needed, you need to fill out 4 bubbles. You need to rank your choices. What does that do? I'll show you how it works with another slide later. But it's a series of instant runoffs. If no one gets over 50% of the first place votes, then the lowest candidate drops out, and all of his or her votes are transferred to the remaining candidates until someone has over 50%. So you have to win with a true majority of your constituents. And now there's 1 ballot in August and then 1 ballot in November. So you only vote once in November, but it's an instant runoff if needed.
How do you distribute the votes that were?
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah, let me skip ahead. So instant runoff ballots, right? You fill out your bubbles, and let's say that Chris was your #1 choice. Okay, Chris in this mock election finished last, so now your vote will get transferred automatically to your second choice until someone has over 50%. So in this case, we only needed 1 extra round with 1 runoff, right? But if Taylor, let's say Taylor had not gotten over 50%, then Sydney would have dropped out, and Sydney's votes would be transferred until someone was over 50%. And so you're just voting once in November, just like we do now, but you're filling out, you're ranking your choices. The opposition likes to say, oh, this is too complicated, voters can't understand that. How many times are we in a grocery store and we say, I really wanted this ketchup, but that ketchup's on sale, so I think I'm gonna do that ketchup instead. I think we can handle four choices, don't you think? And more choices will give voters more power to hold our elected leaders accountable to all of us. Right now, the current system, partisan primary elections, and this is the thesis of this book, partisan primary elections are the root cause to partisan gridlock and the toxic polarization that is crippling our country. Why is that? Because right now, our leaders are only accountable to the 3 to 5% who they need to win that partisan primary, because 80% of our districts in America are so red or so blue that whoever wins that low turnout primary is automatically the winner. And they're not accountable to all of us. They're not accountable to the exhausted majority. They're accountable to this tiny little segment. And if someone dares to be a problem solver, a bipartisan problem solver, what's going to happen to them next cycle? They're going to get primaried. It's become a verb. They're going to get primaried in the next election by someone farther to the right or farther to the left. So that's what we're preventing with this new system. It didn't, yeah.
Let me make sure I understand. So if I vote for Chris and Taylor, so my 4th choice or 5th choice is Sydney or Taylor, my votes for that person will up to Chris?
No. So if you vote for Chris as your first choice, and Chris finishes last, then your vote gets transferred to your second choice, to your second choice.
So our first and second choices
are very important. So you can see how that would change the incentives for how candidates will campaign, right? Because if you're not everyone's first choice, you want to be their second choice. So now you can't win by demonizing the other side. It just doesn't work. So the other things, oh, go ahead, sir.
Are you on the ballot, it's just named, or is it going to say Bob Jones, Democrat, Lisa Smith, Republican?
That's a great question. There will be partisan labels. There will be partisan labels on the ballot. And those are the details that we hope to pass this in November of this year, but it won't go into effect until the August 2024 primary. So there's some time that the legislature and our election officials will have to work out some details, but we expect there to be partisan labels.
Sir,
Yes.
they use the same system in Israel. I've seen it. We're out of Nebraska. Nebraska is
somewhat similar to this system. So my question is, in Nebraska, does it actually work for the participant of the voter to vote that individual into that particular office? Because I heard both sides of the story.
Yeah, so for reform nerds, Nebraska is a state that we love to talk about. They're really innovative. They have a unicameral state legislature. So they don't have two houses and everyone runs on one ballot. They do have an open primary for their state elections. They don't have ranked choice voting though.
They might not have a theoretic, but in the some letters you brought up, contrast the comparison with their choice, with the grid.
To a degree, they have the first step, the open primary, which is great, but you only get to vote for one person in their primary, but everyone is on one ballot. I absolutely like that system better. The book, what it says is that it's the combination of the open primary and the instant runoff that gets us enough competition to break up the duopoly. And to be clear, I want to be really clear to my partisan friends in the room. I am not anti-party at all. Parties serve a purpose. They were very important, especially back before the age of the internet and of the, communicating a message and a platform. Parties will still be very important. They're going to actually, some people argue, have a more important role in figuring out who do we really want to back in a more competitive system. So this is definitely not anti-party.
What if in the general, I only vote for one person?
Yes, so if you only vote for one person, you're essentially just participating in that first round. If your person doesn't win and no one gets over 50%, then you have chosen not to participate in the following rounds. Sometimes critics will say, there's all these votes that are wasted. Well, that was someone choosing not to vote for other candidates. You have that choice, but more power, more choice. More choice is more power. The other thing the Better Elections Ballot Amendment does, all voting machines will have to be tested and certified as secure before every election. There will be a permanent paper record for every vote cast in every round. And this is another thing I'm excited about. Right now in Missouri, there's a vacancy. The governor gets to appoint someone to that position. And we have lots of people that serve not at the pleasure of the people, but at the pleasure of the governor. This calls for special elections anytime there's a vacancy in Missouri. So we already went through the instant runoff ballot. Any other questions on how the ballot and instant runoff voting will work?
First of all, I want to say thank you for your answer.
Oh, sure.
One veteran to another.
Thank you.
But on the question of the governor, isn't that taking away the thesis of the power of the governor in the institution of government from the governor for appointing individuals, which it stipulates the states under state prophecy?
Well, and it's a great question. Every state is different as far as what roles are appointed and what roles are elected, right? So in Pennsylvania, for example, the Secretary of State is appointed, not elected.
Right.
It depends on each state how they've written their constitution. In Missouri, though, our Secretary of State, our Attorney General, they're all elected officials. And we believe that's what the people wanted when they wrote the Missouri Constitution. That's what we want to honor by calling for special elections. So, if it's an appointed position, absolutely, the governor should have that power to appoint it. But if it's an elected position, we want to have an election.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir. So this is where I'll close my presentation and just say we've had a lot of warnings from many people over generations. Our last independent president, George Washington, famously in his farewell address, which if you've never read his farewell address, please do. It's incredibly prophetic. He warned, do not let this nation be divided into two major parties based on geography. That's my summary of it. I've seen the urban-rural divide personally in my own family. I've seen families torn apart over politics. The two major parties The quickest way for them to maintain power and control is through divide and conquer. We're stuck in Coke versus Pepsi from the 1980s. It doesn't have to be this way. John Adams' greatest fear, a division of the Republic into two great parties. Why? Because they were concerned that feeble-minded, selfish men would manipulate the parties for their own power and control. We, the people, have choice. We, the people, have the ability to change the system. We don't have a candidate problem. We don't have, it's not the people in government per se. What it is a systems problem. And we are trying to implement systems-based solutions that we would argue are nonpartisan. And we're implementing these solutions from Alaska to Maine, Wisconsin, to ballot amendments in Missouri and Nevada this year. And this is not going to solve all of our problems overnight. Of course not, right? But it will fundamentally change the incentives in a broken system. And now problem solvers will be rewarded again. Common sense compromise will be rewarded again. When 80% of Americans want something, they will have representatives who respond to the exhaustive majority again. So we can do this. We can be a beacon for the nation, and I sure hope you will support better elections in Missouri in November.
You have mentioned several times, which I understand, and here's my cynicism coming out considerably,
Sure.
that this is a ballot amendment
Yes.
and that it will go into effect for the August 24 election.
Yes.
How will you cannot, I know that, but how will it be guaranteed? Because the Missouri legislature has already shown that a ballot amendment, constitutional amendment doesn't mean squat, Medicare, the Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
So why would this be any different? I guess is what I'm saying.
I would say this is one of the most common questions I get. Great question. And my answer is it's up to all of us. That's all of us who hold our resolution. Not been able to do that. First in practice. People who come out against these ballot amendments actually get rewarded in parts of primaries. So what would I say? Why am I cautiously optimistic this will be different? This campaign is being run by a genuinely cross-partisan team. Some of the best political consultants from both the right and the left are working on this campaign. My last presentation, I did one in St. Charles with his name's Christian Morgan. He was Ann Wagner's former chief of staff. And to hear him talk about why he's working on this, I mean, in part he says, look, I was part of the problem. I was part of the swamp. I used all the scorched earth tactics that you've come to despise. And I'm tired. And I've done some things that I regret, and that's why I'm working on this campaign now. So when you have people like that on both sides working on it, I'm hopeful that between that and the will of the people, that this will actually stick.
What's your opinion of term limits?
So personally, so reformers again, and you can tell I'm a reform nerd. Term limits can be a double-edged sword, right? If they're too short, all the institutional knowledge goes to the lobbyists, and now they're the only ones who know how to write a bill. That's not so. It can create unintended consequences. So what reform nerds generally recommend is about 18 years. 18 to 20 years is more than sufficient for Congress and for states, is what we think is most ideal. That's a personal opinion though. My organization, the only thing Veterans for Political Innovation does is open primaries, voting innovations, and a combination of those two things. Oh, sorry, can we go to? Yeah, so one of the criticisms we get is, is there's a bunch of out of state dark money coming in to change the rules in Missouri. There is seed funding. There was from national organizations that are doing this in states across the country. It's different groups in different states that are more prominent. The biggest one for Missouri is an organization called Article 4 out of Virginia that kind of launched this campaign. the local donors that are excited about this, and that should be announced here soon, would be some of the Commerce, the Kemper Foundation, some of the Taylor family, the McDonald Foundation, are some of the bigger names that I'm aware of that are supporting this.
Just come out of the Washington group.
The Washington, no, it's separate.
There's someone will say you can't avoid something else. Because they wanted to tax the big, down.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with that, sorry.
You know, you have to be careful. There has to be continuity on both ends of Pennsylvania area.
Right.
If you don't have continuity on both ends of Pennsylvania area, the legislation is DPAP,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that right?
By continuity, you mean?
By continuity is this. If you subject elected representatives, senatorial professionals, to term limits, how is the business of this country going to take place? And most importantly, if you subject term limits to elected representatives, it's going to be nothing but gridlock. And most importantly, the business of this country will not take place. So with that in mind, if we look at term limits, again, and you probably get this question numerous times, how is this system going to protect the business of this country to Washington, D.C., or both ends of Pennsylvania? Whatever you want this country.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're not advocating for or against term limits at all. So that was just a personal commentary, which, you know,
I'm asking you your personal opinion.
personal opinion.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I personally am open to some kind of conversation about term limits at some point.
Yes, sir.
But the biggest problem we need to solve right now, and again, I'll go back, and then there's a great 15-minute TED talk from the co-author, Catherine Gale. She's a Wisconsin businesswoman. She's a cheesemaker. Grew up about 10 minutes from her family's cheesemaking business. It's GEHL is her last name. But what they would say is we have partisan gridlock right now. I mean, by any metric, Congress is getting less and less done. I have another slide that I didn't show about that. It's farther on in here.
Here, I can pull it back
Oh,
up.
it's okay. But yeah, by any metric, Congress is getting way less done than it was 20 years ago. And why is that? Because there's this paralysis caused by partisan primary elections, where the biggest fear of our elected officials is being primaried by someone farther to the right, if you're on the red team, or farther to your left, if you're on the blue team. And that fear is paralyzing them from doing any problem solving to get things done on big issues. So that's what we're focused on. Let me see if I can. Yeah, we do run mock elections. I have a tool to do instant runoff voting. This was our launch up in Wisconsin last October because there's legislation pending for what they call Final 5 voting here in Missouri. We're doing Final 4. And it was 3 veterans introduced the bill, 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, 3 of them all veterans. So that's why we launched up there. Yeah, that's our core values. And so, yeah, so what's happened in our country over time, this little chart shows the amount of bipartisan bills passed in Congress over the years. And you can see that it used to be far more common that there would be some common sense compromise or problem solving. That polarization in real world, as recently as 2005, 2006, House committees met almost 450 times to consider actual legislation. Senate committees met 250 times. By 10 years later, they met 50% less to consider real legislation. We're paying them just as much, right? Why is that? They're spending a whole lot of time having to dial for dollars. That's another problem, right? This system won't fix everything.
Isn't that the first course they take when they get elected? You know,
How to raise money. And again, I had a classmate serving in Congress right now from the Naval Academy. I don't think that every person serving in Congress or every person serving in our state legislature is bad. They're just inside of a really bad system with bad incentives.
Well, that's the first one, you know, you guys are hating it. Okay, but I want to say thank you for this first point of that grant. But again, you know, you're looking at what is taking place as progressive thinking. So the question I have for you, sir, from the USDA is this: with that progressive thinking, how low do you think it is going to subside with the average American individual? That's the question. What do you think how this system is going to reside with the average American at the voting booth within this system?
Yeah, I think so. The data we have from states or cities that use this system or something similar to it is very, very positive and encouraging.
Okay.
Voters, the polling coming out after they use ranked choice voting, voters like it. They found it intuitive and easy to use. They see that it is incentivizing a different type of behavior. They like that there's less negative attack ads, there's more collaborative campaigning. So generally speaking, the early data and research is really positive, that the voters get it, they like it, and it aligns, the whole purpose is aligning the mission of our elected officials with the will of the majority of people. That's what we're trying to do. Right now, there's this weird misalignment because of partisan primaries.
You used a statistic, and I didn't follow all of it, about 40% of the veterans are non-partisan. Is there any stats out there for them going deeper and saying, I don't care, and don't even vote?
Don't even vote at all. I do know a lot of veterans who said, you know, while I served, I never voted. And I did that as a choice because I didn't want to be perceived as partisan. I didn't want someone asking me who to vote for and then half of my squadron or whatever is mad at me. I don't have the data on that, but that was from a Pew Research study in 2019 that it was close to 49% of veterans said they didn't identify or affiliate with either of the two major parties. So some of the people would be independent like me, some of them might be more third-party people.
Two things. One, I have heard it would be an interesting comment that if we could elect 5 senators who are going to create the middle,
Yes.
we could control what's going on in the country. Think about the guy from West Virginia, what he's done with 1 vote.
Yeah.
So if we had 5 in the middle, we could be having things go one way or the other based on what those 5 would do.
Yes.
Yeah. The second thing is, okay, you're looking at this, you've got an organization here. How much money are the Republicans and Democrats raising to counteract what you're trying to do with certain the Constitution and its constitutional growth?
Yeah.
You're going to have a big battle.
Yes, it's an uphill battle, and being really frank, trying to raise money for what we do is incredibly challenging. If I affiliated with the red team or the blue team, money would be flowing, right? But we're trying to disrupt the system, and we're trying to appeal to just a very small niche of people that understand the problem.
You're trying to disrupt the system. They're going to fight you.
Absolutely.
Not disrupt them.
Absolutely. So there are really good people working on this. And again, it's the unfortunate reality of politics is it does take a lot of money to get things done. To your first point, sir, what you just described is called the fulcrum strategy. There are organizations working toward that end. Frankly, they have not been very successful. Why? Because electing centrists in a partisan primary system is nearly impossible. But in this new system, electing problem solvers who are more centrist, I don't think that centrist is the answer to all of our problems, but certainly like rewarding problem solving is going to help. So yeah, but that is a strategy.
So have you been able to do any public? So Alaskans, what I understand, is the first state to implement
This system,
this system. And is it taking effect yet?
yes,
Okay.
and it'll be used this summer.
This summer will be the first time. Okay, because So we don't have any results yet, but.
Not
we're about to. So then we get this passed, I guess there was some polling to see how it really felt. Where does Missouri fit into that, initial polling? And you have a lot of education to get out to people. but-
Yes, so the initial polling, I have not seen, they're updating it kind of right now. And we should have that in the next couple weeks. But in Alaska, yeah, they did a lot of polling. It was a very close vote. It passed by just a little bit over 50%. And what happens is when you're trying to pass something like this, right? The status quo warriors, right? The ones who are winning in the current system, they have all the resources, they have all the money, and they use fear to tell people that this is a terrible. Again, you're going to hear this in Missouri. This is dark money trying to take over your state. It's going to make our red state blue. Christian Morgan, who worked for Ann Wagner, said that's absolutely not true. It's going to be different shades of red. In some districts in Missouri, there might be 4 Republicans that make it to the general election. But now they're going to have to compete against each other for everyone's vote, not just in a partisan primary. That's the big difference. So hopefully that makes sense.
I mentioned you speak out of yours. I wish you well, but I just finished the book, The Broken Heart of America, which is very poignant and difficult to read. It's based on St. Louis and our history 400, 500 years back, fur trapper days, and about the struggles back in fur trapper. Then it talks a lot about what happened when the Civil War happened and the things that happened in our state government to isolate Kansas City and St. Louis. And I'm seeing the same kind of things happen. Let's do it short.
Thank you.
I'll make this real quick, okay? Because I have respect for my brother. Okay? Going back to veterans, I work for many veteran organizations.
Yeah.
Okay? So with that in mind, with the vote with veterans, the Constitution of the state must be. But when I found out here, and I did from St. Louis to Kansas City, just sitting around the state, that many veterans feel left out
Sure.
of the system. And especially our young veterans that have done multiple deployments in a place where we're paid, they're not even get into.
Right.
And those are the ones with their families for the most part. Right now. So on the veteran symposium, and that side of the family, those veterans need to understand from individuals like you what this constitutes and how it's going to help them and their families. That's number one.
Right.
And number two, most of all, when it comes to, and we're going to go back to days at the academies of government and politics. This was introduced. It was. And our academies. And the formation of our academies. So how are you, the IAS, going to reach out to those veterans in that veteran community, those young veterans?
Right.
How are you going to reach them? How is your organization going to reach them? And what are you going to use the communication skills to reach them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm spending many of my days with local and national veterans organizations. And a lot of times they'll ask me, so how is this a veterans issue? Fair question. How is this a veterans issue? And I would say this is a root cause issue. What we're trying to do is fix a system that is not serving veterans well right now. Now, some people would say, the two things you can't vote against in our current system are veterans. You do need to be supportive of them. And there's some things that are being done for veterans, but not enough, right? And there's not enough just creative problem solving. So my connection, and sometimes it feels like it maybe doesn't connect enough or doesn't resonate enough, but we have a broken system that's not serving the American people well, it's not serving veterans well. And if we can make the system work better, it's going to be better for everyone, including veterans. So
I would have to say thank you.
sure.
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions and thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't think, I don't, no, we'll have to get cards. So we can pick a winner, they can,
You can just sit there and your mom suggests we roll it over. No, I think we're good.
So, anyway, if you take a refund on your you can do that. Their tickets the next time. Couple things, we had a board meeting yesterday. Couple things, yeah.
the 29th, the meeting on the 29th.
So the 29th is our fifth Wednesday, which is generally a social meeting. There's a lot of people that can't make it, but we know if we can get half a dozen people that want to meet, then we'll go ahead and meet for the sixth Wednesday, or fifth Wednesday. Yeah, there's no sixth Wednesday. So anyway, we want to meet the fifth Wednesday.
Or we do a meeting here. Right. I don't have to, but I'm just saying those are the two choices. Who else? 4. Yeah.
The care of balance are out here. Do,
One of the things, just for your information, we have achieved our $40,000 goal. So for a couple of them, who've given us donations,
Years in a row we've done that. So our capture will be $1,000 a person.
Yep.
Second place is Kirkwood Club, which right now is about $600 of 38 persons. So we'll get back to you as far as where we're going to be the fifth Wednesday.
So no meeting here.
So no meeting here.
Want to make sure that everybody got it. Okay. I'll change the calendar.
It'll be 7 a.m. No,
Quickly, I would like to thank Dave Robinette for helping with the
I'm-
program, too, because he was my executive guy who was,
Yeah.
back and forth to make sure we got the program going well. So thank you very much, Dave. You're
No
a
worries.
behind the scenes guy and you do a lot of work. So
Thanks.
Okay, anything else we did last?
We're having the sports trivia night Saturday the 18th. I'd like to see some sort of representation from the Rotary Club because you never know. You might get a few new members. Okay? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Sounds good. Everyone have a good week. We'll see you next week.